I call the meeting of the CEDA Budget Committee to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Commissioner Lovell,
Here.
Counselor Weber,
Here.
Counselor Moe,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley, here, Counselor Blackwell, here, Counselor Doyle, Counselor Stout, Colby Phillips,
Yes.
Jason Miller,
Here.
Devin Marche Duncan, here, Michael Roman,
Here.
Ruth Linos,
Here.
Art Ayer,
Here.
Bob Brew.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Great. There is one time this evening designated for public testimony and will be listed as business from the audience on the agenda. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the entrance of the library meeting room and give them to staff. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak during that time, please use the raise hand option to be called upon to provide comment when the designated time is announced. The order of public testimony is as follows. 1, anyone who is in person at City Hall. 2, anyone who has raised their virtual hand. 3, anyone who has submitted email in advance. 4, anyone who has submitted written comment via mail in advance. Next on the agenda is the election of the chairperson and vice chairperson. I would like to open up the floor for nominations for the positions of chair.
I would like to nominate Michael Roman for the position of chair. Second.
Are there any other nominations? Okay. So
So you gotta do a vote.
Vote,
So
yes.
all those in favor?
okay, thank you. For all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Okay, keep going. Thank you. Has staff received any requests to speak?
I need a vice chair.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, are there any nominations to elect the vice chair? Councilor Rutley.
Call me Joe Pishner. I would like to nominate Bob Brew as vice chair of the CEDA board.
All in favor?
First, we need a
Second.
second.
I second.
I second it.
How about it?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right. Has staff received any requests to speak cards? Are there any members online that have their virtual hand raised or any written comments received?
Chair, we have no request to speak forms. We have no hands raised and no other testimony.
Are there any questions or topics for discussion regarding the CEDA proposed budget?
So actually, we're gonna do a presentation. I'll do a quick intro. Welcome, for anyone new joining us, I'm Nathan Bell, the city's finance director. So tonight's CEDA budget process is essentially the same as the city's process, just compressed down into 45 minutes. We're gonna have a budget message. It's gonna be delivered by Ally Camp. We're gonna have opportunity for questions and deliberation. At the end of the process, I'm gonna bring up an errata. And there's gonna be opportunity for proposed adjustments. And then we'll be looking for 2 motions at the end of the evening to move the proposed budget forward to the CEDA board for adoption. The formal adoption is gonna happen on June 23rd at a CEDA regular session for anyone who would like to join us. The budget committee is the same as the city's budget committee. However, we have some additional folks joining us. Mayor Van Gordon, who has actually been here all the evenings, but is now in an official role on the budget committee. Commissioner David Lovell and Colby Phillips representing the Downtown Urban Renewal District. We didn't receive any applicants for the Glenwood Urban Renewal District this year, so that position is going to be vacant. And then tonight, I don't have much of a speaking role, fortunately, so it's going to be a quicker meeting. And with that, I'm going to bring it down. city's development manager.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, CETA Board and Budget Committee members for having me tonight. I am going to take the next 15 or so minutes to give you a brief overview on tax increment financing, our two districts that we budget for, and then some accomplishments, initiatives for your considerations. This presentation and these dollars have a very specific intent to be used in a very specific way. And we will talk through that as a board. The CETA board's role is to oversee the use of this money to make sure that it meets that very specific intent, the plans that we have outlined for it, and to set the policy direction for how those dollars are used. And before we jump into it, I just want to give a thank you to Jennifer Zarazura. She is in the city manager's office. She was a helping hand with this budget. And then I'd like to introduce Morgan Lim, the city's legislative and economic development analyst. He will be helping with CETA efforts in the Here we go. A lot happened since we last met. But as a reminder, we have two designated urban renewal districts in Springfield, Glenwood and downtown, as you see on the screen. It's about a little over 1,000 acres and just over 10% of Springfield's geographic area. Glenwood extends from I-5 pretty much to the whole pork chop area of Glenwood. And downtown extends from Island Park to 22nd, 23rd-ish. I just want to note that Booth Kelly is in the downtown urban renewal district that was of interest on Monday. Urban renewal districts are defined and are designated due to their blighted circumstances. Blight is a formal word. Urban renewal is used to revitalize an area. Some of the mechanics of the funds are that our districts were established a while ago and they're reaching a point of maturity. What this means is they've been around long enough to have increment value capable of tackling larger efforts. So whenever folks pay their property taxes in November, the allocation that CETA gets is substantial enough for us to move forward with large projects. If CETA needs funds outside of what comes in annually, we do a borrow, and I'll just make a note on that later as we move through the Glenwood Fund. Each district operates separately. The funds are kept separate, the plans are separate. And they receive separate growth of increment and utilization of dollars. CETA discusses all the work together, so sometimes it can be confusing, but the budgets for each district are managed separately and dollars cannot pass from one district to another. Even when we have contracts for CETA, everything is split line item by line item to make sure that we're using those dollars responsibly for the areas that they represent. Also on the slide, I just like to include the top 3 taxpayers in each district. These are typically businesses. They add a lot of value to the districts because of the physical land value and asset value that they have. If any of them expand or grow over time, that is really healthy for the district. So you can see up there, US Bakery, Far West Steel, Ridgeline Pipe, and then Swenson Group, Ford and Chemical, and then the last one is the Lithia Toyota. Just a little overview of how urban renewal or tax increment financing works. Generally speaking, TIF functions by creating a frozen base after plan adoption. You'll see that on the bottom. And any increment earned after that frozen base becomes tax increment dollars to invest in these urban renewal areas. We have plans that specify how those dollars can be used, and typically they can be used until the plan expires. In our case, our 2 urban renewal plans don't have a specific date of expiration. The expiration date is when the dollars are expended or any debts are repaid. A few things I like to remind folks about urban renewal. It's not a new tax, it's a reallocation of the existing tax base. And then one of the most important things about urban renewal, one of the most important ingredients is time. You can see that as time passes, that payment grows on its own. Springfield's urban renewal districts by our charter require a vote from community members. So thank you voters for seeing the value in this. And as I mentioned earlier, the point of urban renewal is to cure a blighted area. We also talk about it as growing the property tax base. There are a bunch of strategies to make this happen that CETA has utilized. Land acquisition, business investments, infrastructure investments, supporting costs of new or redevelopment. CETA's strategy so far has been to focus on new and redevelopment with land acquisition or fee support for private projects. CETA's also made some quality of place investments that help for other folks to see the value in downtown or Glenwood and spend their money there too. You'll hear throughout my presentation that I'll reference both CETA specific work and private sector work, and that's intentional. We can't grow this increment on our own, so we are partners with the private sector to make investments in these areas. It's all good for the tax base. Okay. I'm going to transition to talking about each district in a little bit more detail. We'll start with Glenwood. Glenwood is our oldest district. It was approved by the voters in 2004 and the frozen base was established in 2005. It is made of primarily commercial industrial land, some residential and some open space. Briefly, the goals are to grow industry and employment, increase and improve the housing stock, and create community access to the river. And some of the tools that we use to achieve those goals are land assembly and redevelopment, as in the Glenwood Master Plan area, which we'll talk a little bit about in a bit. Infrastructure investments such as Franklin Boulevard, the image I had on this last slide. Oop. And then the SDC program, which you'll see on the screen. This program assists with new and redevelopment fees that go into construction. In the past, the program has been used for about $1.2 million for the hotels, primarily the hotels you see in the top right of the screen. We did not see any utilization in 2024. Throughout the past couple of years, the CETA board has worked to refine the SDC program. There is a cap for total utilization in Glenwood of $2 million. And at a date later in the future, CETA will repay those $2 million back to the city in some fashion. Other tools used for redevelopment that benefit CETA's efforts are the housing diversity tax exemption, which also applies to property in Glenwood for multifamily development. Annexation, when properties are moved from Lane County to the city, that helps the tax base. We have a robust enterprise zone program utilization in Glenwood. And then we also have an opportunity zone, which is a federal tax benefit program applicable in Glenwood. I bring this up because I think maybe, Bob, you brought this up on Monday. Layering of these policies in a certain geographic area makes a spot really ripe for redevelopment. So this is an example of a spot that has a lot of tools available for it to encourage that to happen. Okay. Oh, and just some notables. We see businesses expanding in Spring or in Glenwood. Rose and Sunvisor Systems. They make sun visors for commercial airliners. They proceeded with an expansion last year. Franz has a $20 million investment in the enterprise zone program, which they finished their last claims and it will hit the tax roll the coming year. And then the hotels in Glenwood, which are a really good example of the future vision of this area. They continue to be productive. They continue to pull in both TLT, which is transient lodging tax, and the property tax increment that's so valuable for the Glenwood area. So a little bit of a heavy hitter there with the hotels. And then this is the urban renewal theory in action. This is a graph of the frozen base and increment accrual from 2015 on. This shows property values in the Glenwood district and the frozen base, as I said. And over time, there's general positive growth in Glenwood. Our authorized maximum indebtedness in the Glenwood Urban Renewal Plan is that 32.8 million number, and we have spent about 51% of that to date. And Ruth, you noted this on Monday. Glenwood is a really unique area because of that ability to annex into the city, so that it plays a little bit with the property tax values over time. It's not such a steady increase because as properties annex in, there's more to play with. Okay. We'll transition to downtown. Downtown is a little bit larger of a district. It was approved than Glenwood in size. It was approved by the voters in 2007 and the base was frozen in 2008. It is primarily mixed-use commercial and residential land. The primary goals for the Glenwood or the Downtown Urban Renewal Plan are revitalization, public-private investment, rehabilitating the building stock, improving and expanding housing options, and improving infrastructure. Some of the redevelopment tools that we use in downtown are also used in Glenwood, primarily land acquisition. You can see the CETA's acquisition of the bank at the bottom of the screen. The SDC program is robustly used in downtown as well. Total program utilization in downtown is about $685,000, and we saw $112,000 of utilization last year. Also with the work that the CETA board did on refinement of the program, when we have SDC invoices over $100,000, the board gets to discuss how those get paid back over time. We had 2 of those come in, so the board will discuss those to inform next year's budget. This is another good example of the layering of policies because we also have the housing diversity tax exemption available in parts of downtown, the enterprise zone, and the opportunity zone. Some notables that we see businesses continuing to expand. At the top of your screen, that is Castle of Games. They moved from a small location in the core of downtown to a larger location on the edge of downtown. I bring them up because it was important to them to remain in the downtown area. They're supporters of the Banner program. They're supporters of the communications that come from downtown and from the city of Springfield. They really like it here, and they're in a great, new, lovely space. Roseboro is proceeding with a large investment for their engineered wood product, which part of that investment falls in the urban renewal district, which is great for the tax base. And then there are small scale, and they've also applied for an enterprise zone. 2 notable enterprise zones, Roseboro with a new application, and then Swanson Mill had an old application originally approved in like 2015 or 2016. It will be fully on the tax rolls moving forward. So, and then a couple of small scale, big impact items. You'll see on the screen that the Downtown Urban Renewal District offers banners to businesses that want to participate in them. They put them on the curb. That is a new banner that we did for the Vision Center on A Street. There are a couple of trash cans downtown that now are fully usable and regularly emptied to keep downtown.
Sorry, Ally.
We also provide catenary, the string lights and decorative lighting for downtown to add character and sense of space. We have a certain amount of bike racks available to downtown businesses that make improvements and want to provide more bike parking. And then we provide marketing, communications, and ecosystem support for our downtown businesses. Downtown is special. Thanks, Jessica.
Of course.
And then here is our downtown urban renewal theory slide in action. This shows the property values in the downtown district. The red bar is the frozen base and the green is the growth over time. We're seeing definitely positive growth in the downtown district, and you can see the implications of some of those enterprise zone investments coming on the rolls. 1 year will be low, the next year will be high. Enterprise zone is really great because it supports employment and it supports investment from businesses that are already doing really well here. Our authorized maximum indebtedness in the downtown plan is a little over $43 million. And we are about 23% through that currently. Moving to our FY25 accomplishments, a busy year from the board. I'll briefly talk through each one of these. The Glenwood Riverfront master planning work continued through fiscal year 25. The planning team that we're using from Rao Brokaw Architects and Walker Macy Landscape Architects continue to refine the concept and work on the land use work that we need to do in order to deliver that vision that the CETA board has approved. CETA has, part of that land use work is annexation of the property, and CETA has received approval for annexation of all 21 acres. CETA owns about 15 of those 21 acres, and that will be effective at the end of May. The consultant team has started preparing the next steps of land use work after that annexation. That land use work looks like code amendments, map amendments, and then the formal master plan, which will lay out the infrastructure grid for the whole area. I anticipate this work to last through 2025 and the first half of 2026. Another big accomplishment in fiscal year 25 was residential relocation in the master plan area. There were 8 households on the properties that CETA acquired over time. Those 8 households were eligible for federal relocation support because they were on the site of a future proposed redevelopment. All 8 households found safe, sanitary, and secure replacement housing with the help of CETA and our subcontractors. Two of those households moved into homeownership, which is awesome. One moved into homeownership in Springfield, so. That whole process took about a year from start to finish. And then finally in Glenwood, those 8 households plus 3 auxiliary buildings were demolished in November in order to keep the site clean and safe. Moving on to the second portion of accomplishments, these are downtown focused. We are in the act of repaying our CETA SDC program for downtown. You'll see that in your budget for the first time last year. It's about $570,000, and it is a line item in your budget this year, and we'll be moving forward to make sure that that program stays up to date. The CETA board acquired 2 key development properties in downtown, one of which is on your screen. The 2 properties were the Buick building and the parking lot behind it, plus the US Bank building at 437 Main Street. These properties were acquired for assembly or future redevelopment opportunities. The CETA board closed on the same day in September. It was a very expensive day. And then finally, the last 2 accomplishments on here relate to the whole of CETA's work. CETA contracted with a professional property management company to keep our properties clean, safe, our leases enforced, and our tenants to have a more responsive body for them. It's been very effective in terms of managing potential tenancy, potential sale, and with the portfolio that CETA has, just keeping better care and eyes on it over time. And then finally, the CETA board over the course of last year reviewed its entire property portfolio and started taking next steps on all of the sites. This is a big deal. CETA's portfolio is not small. I'll touch base on a couple of the things moving forward. But I do want to note too that this is the first year since I've been here that no acquisition is planned. So the portfolio should either stay or shrink moving forward. Okay. And then some fiscal year 26 initiatives. You might look at this screen and be like, this is the most boring picture ever. That's the point. There are no properties there. This is the Glenwood Master Plan area where the 11 properties were removed in November of 24. And the landscape has grown because of the rain, because of spring. But this is the first time in a long time that from Franklin Boulevard, you could potentially see the river on that site, which is pretty special. The goal of that Glenwood project is to reconnect the community to the river. So we're getting there. For the FY26 initiatives, these are what inform the budget in front of you. The Glenwood Riverfront Master Planning work will continue. A lot of the work moving forward will be the planning work that I mentioned over the end of 25 and the beginning of 26. And then contracting and legal work in order to begin to think about the future of development on this property. You'll see a legal costs increase in Glenwood because of that. Begin implementation of a downtown property strategy. The CETA board's 2025 property acquisitions were strategic and significant. The board has identified 437 Main Street, the bank property, as a priority site to move to redevelopment. This site is special. It's a full city block. It's very visible. It connects Main Street to South A, to the bus station. And at the board's retreat, they identified this as a priority to focus on over the next year. Next is another property of focus to define a dispositioning plan for 765 A Street, also known as the Memorial Building. In the CETA board's retreat, they also identified an interest in moving that building to the next step of redevelopment. As the board looked at the portfolio, this was the only one that didn't have a certain outcome moving forward. Since that conversation, the board has listed the property for sale, and the plan is to have an offer selected before summer break. This might seem like we're ahead of schedule, talking FY26. Don't worry, there will be a lot of work to do in 26 for this property moving forward. And then the last one on here is to develop processes for the CETA board. A lot of what we're tackling is first time in a long time. And there is private development interest in downtown. People want to build here. The CETA board has a chance to learn from the processes that we're setting up for the Memorial Building or shape new processes whenever private projects are looking for leverage or support to help us meet our goals for downtown. Overall budget impression is that for Glenwood and downtown, we're moving towards project implementation. You'll see these things in the budget with increases in contractual services, property maintenance, and I think maybe just a couple of things I want to call out for you. I noted that this is the year that we don't have any acquisition planned. There's one line item in Glenwood and it's a capital expense. This is an example of when the CETA board had to do a borrow in order to proceed with work moving forward. It's called property acquisition, but what that line item does is move the entirety of the Glenwood work forward. The planning work, the relocation work, the acquisition that we did need to do to get to this point. And then I noted earlier that our SDC expenses will continue to be in your budget for downtown moving forward. And then one other item, the Buick building, while we closed on the sale in September, we are on an installment plan to pay for it, and you will see that as debt service payments in your budget. And then finally, 3-year considerations. The next 3 years should be very exciting as we continue to move forward the Glenwood Master Plan Area Project. In the next 3 years, I anticipate to be completed with the land use and entitlement work that we need to do to get the land right, to do the things. And then we can start to think about next steps for engineering, infrastructure, and agreements to move forward with. Serving the land along Franklin McVeigh Boulevard is also important. There's a 40-acre piece of land in Glenwood. 40 acres is huge. Springfield doesn't have properties like that, and it's totally vacant. So whenever we think about potential future development on that site, it's really healthy for the tax base. This is a private project that will also move forward CETA's goals. So making sure we stay in close connection with that property owner. And then just positioning our development sites downtown with CETA's recent strategic acquisitions, making sure that in the next 3 years they get some traction to moving towards their future redevelopment selves. I anticipate plans for these properties to solidify in the next 3 years. So as I noted earlier, these are a mix of CETA owned and initiated projects and private sector efforts. All are good for the tax base. CETA's dollars can be leveraged with our own projects or with others to meet these goals that the plans outline for downtown and Glenwood. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Are there any questions or topics for discussion regarding the CETA proposed budget?
I have a question about the general, along Old Franklin, is the Fran expansion gonna be on the riverside? What's happening at that big MC?
The Riverside vacant lot.
Yeah.
Right now it's owned by a private entity and they are bringing in dirt to fill it in order to accommodate future redevelopment. They're getting it ready for whatever it may be in the future.
We saw massive inflation the last 3 years. Is CETA happy with your growth when you adjust those numbers for inflation?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been, still looks good.
We touched on it last night, but are there any plans for you guys to start looking at that property on Mohawk, the big empty ugly building?
Yeah, I think people refer to it as the Wearmart site. That property is outside of the downtown urban renewal district, but we have seen some land use activity come in for a portion of the site. So the owner may have plans moving forward.
A question sort of with the PR hat, with budget committee members, just kind of understanding. So if you could clarify, with all these properties that CETA has acquired, the benefit of purchasing and then selling versus sort of letting the free market buy and sell. I'm just kind of curious how that impacts the budget. Practically, obviously, there's the cost of the properties, but what understanding what part of that strategy is and how that works.
Sure, that's a great question. For the 2 acquisitions that happened last year, the Buick building and the parking lot behind it and the bank building. The intent of the CETA board to acquire those was to do something bigger or support something bigger that maybe the private sector wouldn't deliver on its own. The bank property is so special, and also there's a bank on it. It could easily stay a bank for a very long time. With the Buick property, CETA acquired the small lot in between the Buick building and the post office. In order to make something impactful happen on that property, they sought more land. So it's part of a land assembly effort.
So I'm paraphrasing, is it in a way to help kind of direct in a more desirable fashion versus someone just throwing up whatever they want?
Yes.
Okay.
And that could be that the vision for the property is larger than what it may today, or it's a special site
Right.
with like community connections to it that the board wants to foster.
The intention of urban renewal is to assemble plots of land that are unusable, unsellable, and put them together in a package and find somebody that can come in and develop the whole thing at once and raise the values of the whole neighborhood. So the little pieces we talk about, they just don't move, they don't know what to do with them. And we come in and we can acquire them. That's what needs to be.
You'll also notice that they're on corners. And it tends to be that when you develop on a corner and you make something special there, then things tend to grow around it. So that's something that we've seen as well, so.
If I could add one more comment to that too, and it's also to have a certain degree of control of what goes in.
Sure.
Because there's a visionary, to what's happening downtown and what's being momentum driven. So just to let that go on the free market and have that opportunity pass us by and maybe have something of less desirable use to
Right,
happen.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, makes sense.
And since we're all adding onto it, and I think that there's been properties that we've passed on, so there's that too, that have been like those don't necessarily fit to the strategy. And the idea is, of course, that once we get these started, then the free market takes over, right? Once we've sort of set the idea of what's happening, then we can get out of the way, hopefully, and let it happen.
I had a question specifically about Booth Kelly. First of all, what is that zoned?
Well, it's a mix of things. There's a Boot Kelly specific zone for it. A portion of it is industrial. And then there is some like public land there as well, I believe.
So my question is, I guess it's kind of crosses this border, right? Because there might be interest in redeveloping that property at some point. I'm sure there's like pollution issues and so on site from being a mill for so long. There's interest in redeveloping that, excuse me, but at the same time, the city relies on income from Booth Kelly, which would go away if it was redeveloped. So how is CETA thinking about Booth Kelly, or is it on their radar at all?
Sure. That property is actually owned by the city, so the council will direct the vision and any sort of next steps for that. What I can tell you about Booth Kelly is that in 2022, the council initiated a resolution that directed Booth Kelly to be leased through fiscal year 27. So that's the pathway we're on now.
I'm trying to understand the beginning cash balance, 2.954 thousand, 2.9 million. If I look at the amended fiscal year 25, see about 1 million less than that in reserves, and I'm wondering, are you underspending your FY 25 amended by about 1 million, or your resources more, or a combination of the two, or?
Feel free to chime in.
Arthur. Oh, page 7 and 8.
During last year's budget committee review, you may remember, we had 2 property acquisitions that were anticipated to span the fiscal year, so we budgeted for both of them. That was the bank property and the Buick property. We weren't sure which fiscal year they would fall in, so we did some doubling up, and I will wait for anything to confirm that.
Yeah, on page 8, under, I guess it's the non-departmental budget, the first 3 lines are reserves. And those fiscal year 25, they total, basically, nine. Yeah, nine.
Essentially, though, I think what you're asking is the reserves are growing. And so it's just in that year, we don't have a lot of plans for those dollars. So we're building up reserves. But as you can see, we've got some, big projects on the horizon. And it's those reserves that are gonna help us with those larger projects as well as some additional borrowing at a later date. Does that get at what you're asking?
Yeah. Thank you.
Questions, okay? Is there a motion to approve?
Well, so before we do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring up an errata worksheet.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And there is an opportunity to propose adjustments if folks have any. Typically when we bring up these errata worksheets, they're blank. However, this year we're gonna have a couple items on there. These are items that came to our attention after we put the budget together, but because we're aware of them before we're gonna be adopting it, we're required by Oregon budget law to include them now if we want them in the budget. All right, so essentially, for the first adjustment, it's adjusting the taxes. That's the result of our budget software. We copy forward the previous year budget into the new year, and then we go in there and make the adjustments. There was some confusion on who was adjusting the CETA current tax revenues, and they did get adjusted. And this was something that Ally had flagged, and they were just flatlined. And so we're actually adjusting the current taxes to what we expect them to be. So we're increasing property tax revenues in both funds, 229, 230, and then those are just going into the reserves as well. The second item is, and Ally referred to this in her presentation, it's our SDC pickup program. And so we're paying back $12,000 of those SDCs that were covered by looks like the downtown urban renewal district.
We had budgeted for 100,000 and they came in a little bit over.
And so this would be an opportunity. We need to do two things here. One is I'm looking for a motion just to accept these adjustments onto the errata. And then if anyone else would like to put forward proposed adjustment, it would take a second to go to a vote. And then if it gets that second, it would require, since it's a committee of 15 members, a quorum is 8, it would take 8 positive votes to get that adjustment onto the errata. So if we could just start with a motion to accept the items that we have populated the errata with.
Does that work? Or you want
That
me
works
to-
for a motion?
Okay,
Yes.
all right, then I will second that.
Any discussion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Carried.
Carried.
And then any proposed adjustments from the committee?
This is where we can put the city council pay.
You and I on the same page. I was just thinking that.
So.
a piece of pizza.
Not ready for those motions.
Okay.
And then with the first motion is we're gonna want to read these adjustments into that motion.
I'm gonna paste it in. Right here.
Right.
One quick sec, let me share. Share.
All those in favor.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
I move to approve the, does it need to say CETA or you're good with budget? All right, I move to approve the budget as proposed by the city manager in the amount of $6,571,370 with the following, with no changes. Is that the wrong one?
With the following
Oh, with the
changes,
following changes.
and then read each of those lines.
Increase fund 229, current taxes revenue 229-00000-4111111 in the amount of 51,030.
I'll have to read the accounts.
Okay, thank you. Increase Fund 229 Operating Reserve in the amount of 51,030. Increase Fund 230 Current Taxes Revenue in the amount of 66,339. Increase Fund 230 Operating Reserve in the amount of 66,339. Increase Fund 230 City Manager's Office Expenditures in the amount of 12,203. Decrease Fund 230 Operating Reserve in the amount of 12,203.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move to recommend that the Springfield Urban Renewal Agency Board of Directors request that the county assessor provide the maximum amount of revenue for the urban renewal plan areas that may be raised by dividing the taxes under Section 1C, Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. There's no other business. I adjourn the Springfield Economic Development Agency Budget Committee.
Go for it.
Okay, so calling the meeting of the Springfield Budget Committee to order, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Here.
Counselor Mo,
Here.
Counselor Rodley,
Here.
Counselor Blackwell,
Here.
Counselor Doyle,
Here.
Counselor Stout, Jason Miller,
Here.
Devin Marche Duncan,
Here.
Michael Roman,
Here.
Ruth Linos,
Here.
Art Air,
Here.
Bob Brew.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. So there is one time this evening designated for public testimony and will be listed as business from the audience on the agenda. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located near the entrance of the library meeting room and give them to staff. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak during that time, please use the raise hand option to be called upon to provide comment when the designated time is announced. The order of public testimony is as follows. 1, anyone who is in person at City Hall. 2, anyone who has raised their virtual hand. 3, anyone who has submitted email in advance. And 4, anyone who has submitted written comment via mail in advance. So first up, we are going to move into business from the audience. So has staff received any requests to speak cards?
No, staff has not received any.
Are there any members online that have their virtual hand raised?
No hands raised.
And any written comments received?
No written comments.
So I think we're going to be moving to the public hearing state shared revenue. So next on our agenda is the public hearing on the use of state shared revenues. Before I open the public hearing, we have a brief presentation from staff.
I'm on my way.
Just doing everything.
All right, good evening, Budget Committee members. For the record, my name is Jessica Mummy. I'm the city's Budget and Procurement Manager here this evening to talk about state shared revenue. I have to admit, yesterday I approached Nathan about completely changing the approach to this year's state shared revenue presentation. Historically, this presentation's at about the 30,000 foot level. I decided that, we need to drop a couple thousand feet of altitude and get into the weeds just a little bit more. So I wanted to do this because state shared revenue does have a revenue impact that affects the general fund. The first part of my presentation this evening will focus on state shared revenue in general, and the second part will focus on state shared revenue that is specific to the city of Springfield. A majority of state shared revenues are distributed to cities based on population, but some use a much more complex distribution methodology, which you'll see. Using projections from the state of Oregon, the League of Oregon Cities actually produces estimates on state shared revenues for cities to utilize when they're building their budgets. We at the city of Springfield carefully analyze that data when we're developing our budgets and factor it in to our considerations. Projections for distributions to cities may be revised throughout the year as revenues come in or as laws change. State shared revenues are often threatened due to the decreases for local governments as the state of Oregon navigates balancing their own budget, as you've probably heard in the news. Earlier today, I watched the state of Oregon revenue and economic forecast that was presented to the Senate Committee on Finance and Revenue. That was definitely interesting. The news release on that is, don't be surprised to see potential impacts to these revenue sources in the future. With that, let's dive into the four funding sources we receive from the state. We'll just do a really high level, and I hope that this proves valuable. So I love airplanes, so first of all, let's talk about the Highway Trust Fund. And so the state's Highway Trust Fund supports construction, reconstruction, preservation, maintenance, repair, and improvement of streets and roads. In 2017, the Oregon State Legislature approved a comprehensive funding package known as House Bill 2017. This bill increased cities' per capita funding quite significantly, actually. The package included a graduated increase in the state's fuel tax over the course of 4 years. So prior to 2018, the state's tax rate was 30 cents per gallon. As it graduated up in 2024, that rate is now 40 cents per gallon.
How do they justify that, knowing that the Pacific Northwest, our gas prices are so ridiculously high compared to the rest of the country anyway? I mean, that's outrageous to me.
I honestly don't know. I'm more than happy to ask.
I'm just like, it's just insane.
In addition, the bill included a 53% increase in weight mile tax and graduated increase in title and registration fees that we pay at the DMV. Recently, the legislature revealed the Oregon Transportation Reinvestment Package, colloquially known as TRIP 2025. This is the state of Oregon's latest transportation package. I'm closely following the coverage on this package, and I'll continue to monitor developments as they become available. So next is going to be liquor revenues. Cities share a total of 34% of this revenue source. 20% is distributed on a per capita basis. 14% is distributed using a formula that accounts for property taxes, population, and income. This is the very complicated one. At some point in time, I'm going to ask the state for their actual formula because I want to see it. The three major contributors to this revenue source are the sale of distilled spirits, liquor license fees, and taxes that we pay on beer, wine, and cider. 95% of the revenue is made up of distilled spirit sales. If you may or may not know, the state of Oregon maintains an exclusive right to sell on packaged distilled spirits, and they set the markup on those wholesale prices. The markup formula has not been changed since 1993. At approximately 8 cents per gallon or 4 cents per six-pack, Oregon's beer and cider tax is one of the lowest in the United States and has remained unchanged since 1978. And finally, the wine tax is in the middle range for all of the states at 67 cents per gallon, and this has remained unchanged since 1983. And this is another thing you may have heard. The OLCC warehouse is reaching capacity, and the legislature approved construction of a new facility in 2021. Any of the expenses that are used for this new warehouse reduce the revenue for cities, as the bonds are paid strictly out of the gross liquor revenues paid by cities, or the share that comes to cities. The cost of this project has increased from 62.5 million to about 150 million, making the 34% of the project quite substantial. On to the third of four, which is marijuana tax revenue. The state of Oregon imposes a 17% tax on recreational marijuana, not medical marijuana. Until the end of 2020, cities would receive 10% of the state's total tax revenues minus expenditures, which include admin, on the recreational marijuana costs. In November of 2020, you may recall the passage of Measure 110, which decriminalized the possession of small amounts of street drugs. And this resulted in a massive reallocation of state marijuana revenue distributions. Beginning in March of 2021, quarterly revenues to cities saw roughly a 74% decrease from the prior quarter. Compounding the sharp reduction in revenue after the passage of Measure 110, marijuana sales continued to see a downward trend because, as noted by the League of Oregon Cities, the market is saturated and at an oversupply of products, driving prices down. Marijuana is taxed on the price of the product and not on volume of sales. The formula for distributing to cities' share has changed over time. However, since 2017, 75% of the shared revenue is distributed to eligible cities on a per capita basis, and 25% is based on the number of licensed premises within the city. The final one is cigarette tax. And this one is pretty exciting, actually, even though it doesn't look it. In November of 2020, voters passed Measure 108, which increased cigarette taxes by $2 a pack. It increased the cap on cigar tax from 50 cents to $1, and it created a tax on vape products at 65% of the retail price and preempted cities from taxing vape products. After the increase, cigarette taxes are at $3.33 per pack, and cities receive 2 cents. While cities receive a share of the tax, revenues for cigarettes, no state shared revenue is distributed for taxes on those other tobacco products, like cigars, snuff, chewing tobacco, pipe tobacco, and vape. So on to the cities. The City of Springfield's budget for state shared revenue is on the screen under the general fund. Please note that the liquor apportionment, the top line, and the state revenue sharing apportionment are split out. If you'll recall on the third slide, liquor revenues are distributed in those two different ways, a 14% formula and a 20% per capita. The state shared revenue line, the third line, reflects the 14% share, and the liquor apportionment line reflects the 20% share. I've also included, the local marijuana revenue. Even though this is not classified as state shared revenue, this line item comes from the 3% tax on the sale of marijuana that was passed by Springfield voters in November of 2016, which was Measure 20-2054. And then if we look at the street fund, this captures our highway trust fund, state shared revenue. The city elects to break these revenues into 2 buckets, with 99% going to roads and 1% going to bicycles. This is not a requirement. This is just how the city elects to do it. And finally, the special revenue fund houses the revenue we receive from the state for the marijuana apportionment, and the city utilizes this for public safety purposes. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't have a question, but that was delightful. I was just excited along with you, and I appreciate it because I think it's very helpful for folks to understand how those taxes do or don't filter in. So thank you for taking the time to do that.
Thank you, Counselor.
This statewide.
This is just the City of Springfield snapshot. So yeah, that's one reason why I approached Nathan about it is, 2.5 million just in the general fund. So, it's a portion, but it's worth talking about.
Do we know why the highway apportionment went down in fiscal 25 amended?
Yes, the highway apportionment, the information we received from the League of Oregon Cities last fiscal year. So we didn't actually amend it. It stayed flat since the fiscal year 25 adopted budget. But we decided to trend downward based on advice from the League of Oregon Cities and what we were hearing from the state at the time.
But then back up in fiscal 26.
Correct. And that's again, just based on feedback from the League of Oregon Cities.
Okay.
And we have been hitting that. So it has been trending really close. Any other questions? Cool. I'll head back to my corner.
Okay, so I will now open the public hearing on the use of state shared revenues. Has staff received any requests to speak cards, or are there any members online that have their virtual hands raised?
Staff have not received any cards. There are no members with their hands raised.
Any written comments received?
No written comments received.
Right. So now we get to move on to budget deliberation.
Close the hearing.
On my list.
You say you closed the hearing.
I closed the hearing. Okay,
Thank you.
so
Dennis.
now we move on to budget deliberation. So are there any questions or topics for discussion regarding the proposed budget? That makes it easy. There is the option for a 5-minute intermission, or we can just keep going if we're okay. Keep going. So next on the agenda is the errata summary from staff.
Right, similar to CETA, we actually have this pre-populated with an adjustment that we became aware of after we put the budget together. For this particular one, and this was something we knew we were doing, we just didn't know what the price would come in at from the RFP, but we have hired a new class and compensation consultant to restructure our compensation plan for our SEIU bargaining group as well as our non-union. And we have a budget of 50,000. The contract came in at 140,000. And so we're increasing human resources budget by $90,000, and we're pulling that from our insurance fund reserves. So similar, we'll want to have a motion to accept this item onto the errata, and then we'll also open or turn it back to the chair to entertain any proposed adjustments from the budget committee. Again, it's going to take a second to go to a vote, and then our quorum will be 7 positive votes for it to make it up onto the errata.
I move that we accept the fiscal year 26 city budget erratum worksheet, which includes increase the insurance fund human resources operating expense by 90,000, decrease the insurance fund reserves by 90,000.
Second.
Is this what you're- Okay, so we don't get any discussion on it? We're just going straight to a vote?
No, you can have discussion. Typically, then after we've got that second, is there any discussion?
There.
So my question to you is, you know, how I feel about consultants. So we budgeted and it came in that much higher for a consultant. How did we not know that it was gonna be
So.
significant difference in the amount?
Come on.
I'm gonna avoid the hot seat today. So we didn't actually have a number in mind. We just kind of used, the original number was really just what we used for our every 3-year market study. So unlike our traditional collective bargaining agreements where we agree and negotiate a merit increase on an annual basis, the SEIU and non-RAB have an adjustment that occurs once every 3 years. So it's lead, meets, falls, and it's a pretty extensive market study. The consultant that we're utilizing, the reason it has a higher startup is that it's a full assessment of our entire classification and comp system, which has created problems for us in being competitive in the market. It's not something we can do internally because of Oregon's Equal Pay Act. And so we need to make sure that as we're aligning this, that we're aligning our positions based on comparable character. And so we knew that it would be somewhere in this range. It wasn't surprising. And so we're really looking at a dollar figure that's going to be the implementation of that, which is a pretty heavy consultant load to implement the new pay ranges at the same time that we're bargaining the contract with SEIU. And that the overarching piece of it is that on the long term, this consultant is at a lower price than what we're currently paying with our existing consultant.
So I guess that's fine and we'll vote on this, but it would be nice to see us over budget and then have to go down, than to always have to go up. And we're not going up 10 grand, we're going up 90 grand. I mean, that's significant. That is a real underestimation of what this was gonna cost, is all I'm saying.
Counselor Doyle, if I may, this actually was, our compensation system. I remember when I came here, It's very complicated. I was like, why? Why are the positions that they're kind of in bands? Like, well, this is an A band or this is a C band. And I was like, I had never seen compensation geared that way. I've seen it more tied to what is the job classification, and then it's easier to compare across organizations by classification. So this is something that I've been kind of like noodling in my head as well, like just trying to understand it really as somebody coming in fresh into the organization. And I think it's also, so basically we're trying to fix a system that was developed a long time ago, and it wasn't kind of perfect at that time, but it was like, well, it gets us to a start of putting like positions together. But the problem is that since we've had more legislation such as the Oregon Pay Equity Act, which I think is an important piece of legislation, but our current system doesn't allow us to compare in the way that we need to when we consider adjusting wages. So I agree with you. It's a large expense. I think, I'm not surprised at the cost of it because of it's our entire compensation system is not just the type of analysis we do for bargaining to see where we are in the market. This is looking at the whole thing, and I'd be happy to schedule some time with you and Shane to like go over what that looks like if you'd like. And the other part is it's a highly specialized type of field. We don't ordinarily have staff in the city that would be doing this type of analysis. So I don't, it wasn't so much of an increase as, trying to put a placeholder number to where it might come in. But you're right, that is a significant adjustment. So I'd be happy to schedule some time offline, or we can even, discuss it as the full council.
I guess I would just add one other thing, which is there wasn't actually intended logic because we weren't sure on the timing of when we would get through the RFP process. And so the number that was initially placed is what we pay every 3 years for the annual survey. That's what the initial budget dollar was.
But you knew this one was gonna be more.
We knew, we were just hoping that we would get through the process faster, but the process of going through the budgetary RFP process took longer before we were able to launch the RFP because we had to get the statement of work right. So we were hoping timing wise, it would fit better with the budget cycle than it. I'm not surprised by the number. I'm actually pleased that overall it will result in a long-term savings for the city. And I think it's also important to recognize out of this particular group, which is a pretty large part of our population, we have a negotiated process where we pay below the market for 1 year. It's part of the 3-year agreement that we have with SEIU. So this consultant is critical because overall it results in a net savings for the city. But I'm not surprised by the 145,000. We just weren't sure at the time of when we were going to complete the RFP process as to what to plug in the number. And so we just put a safety little dollar in there just to make sure we had a placeholder. But it came in roughly what we expected it to look like.
So I guess what I would say is, and I'm not trying to say that it isn't worth the money. What I'm saying is that if you both said that you're not surprised by the number, you should have put in a number that was higher, because I would have rather had you put in $150,000 and then came in and said it was only 135 or whatever, than to put in 80 and have it go up $90,000. That's what I'm saying. It looks bad. That's fair when you do that. So.
Yeah, that's fair.
And could I ask the results from this consultant, is it gonna save time for HR in implementing it? Is that part of the packaging of the?
Yeah, so it's not a traditional consult where you just get an outcome or they give you a recommendation of what to do. They actually do the work. So it's less than traditional. And they actually save HR a lot of work because they also serve as kind of our arbitrator when we have disputes on whether somebody's in the right classification of the pay grade. We use the consultant during the 3-year period for that. And so I'm not even confident that we're going to end up spending that full amount. I think we'll be able to come in under because our system is fairly mature. It just needs some adjustments, which will build some efficiencies. I hear you on that. The existing system that we had in place has been in existence for, I want to say 15 years. And so the last time that we've gone through this process, the knowledge base of the individuals who did that are no longer with the organization. So we weren't exactly sure what that was going to look like.
I just want to add a little anecdotal compare and contrast. Having been through this at the county, front row seat to this at the county, is a good 3-year process with a specialized person, full-time person. who did it. And it was a ton of work. Ended up with simplified bands that were much more understandable, that then were able to be used during bargaining. And most folks ended up much happier, but I'm just saying that if we were to hire a person to do this for a short term, it would cost a whole lot more because it's a real specialty field. And so to me, it feels like, and we're not alone. I mean, it's time, because first there was the pay equity in Oregon. It's required us to look at our positions that have, I think any municipality, those have kind of spread out over time, and we've ended up with multiple, say, analysts doing different things that shouldn't be analysts, that sort of thing, which I know you know. So I'm just sharing a little anecdotal information of the alternative of something that we would have to do that would end up being much more expensive. And overall, I think this will serve the workers of Springfield.
And we were losing confidence, I should say. Our union partners, SEIU in this situation, I think was losing confidence in our previous consultant. And we likewise were somewhat concerned that we were going to get back to a traditional.
We heard that, yeah.
Yeah, so we were proactively trying to figure out a way to resolve this. You've heard earlier, I think when Brian Conlon was talking about just the difficulty in retaining trades positions. And so it's trades and engineers that we're really hoping that this consultant can help us figure out why we're missing the boat with our existing broadband system. So I hear you, we probably should have placed a bigger number. We just weren't sure.
Yeah, I just wanted you to know, I'm not arguing the amount.
Yeah.
So it's just the method.
Appreciate it.
Actually, I'm thankful that you asked that question, because when we had this up on the errata, I was like, this is actually a really big project that I wouldn't mind talking about a little bit. So I'm glad we had the discussion.
Carry the motion again, vote on it.
Well, we got a motion and second, so then now to vote.
All in favor? Okay, so next on the agenda,
So you want to open it up to any potential proposed adjustments, if anyone would like to make any.
Mr. Jessup. Okay, so next up is it looks like the budget deliberation process. So this is the opportunity to hear from staff about the motion and deliberation process of the budget.
Actually, we've already passed that, so we're actually at the point of motions.
Okay, so, there a motion to approve the budget, including any changes?
I move that we approve the budget as proposed by the city manager with the following changes. It's gonna have to get to the amounts. Oh, so sorry. One second. I learned that the first time. Otherwise, I thought I was gonna have to read those things again. Okay. Increase insurance fund, human resources operating expense in the amount of 90,000. Decrease insurance fund reserves in the amount of 90,000.
Second.
All in favor?
I.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I move to direct council to levy a property tax for the 2025-26 fiscal year at a rate of $4.7403 per thousand.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I move to direct council to levy a special operating local option property tax for the 2025-26 fiscal year at a rate of 38 cents per thousand, the fire local option levy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I move to direct council to levy a special operating local option property tax for the 2025-26 fiscal year at a rate of $1.40 per thousand, the police and court local option levy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
And I move to levy an additional $6,075,000 for the retirement of the city's bonded indebtedness.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. So if there is no other business, I adjourn.
We adjourn. So just really quickly, three of you, yeah, I know, term it out. Jason, Devin, and Arthur, you've reached the end of your term, but it's all for your first term, so you're all eligible to apply again. We'll be posted, I think typically in February or March, so we'll reach back out to you and hope to see you all again. I want to thank all of you for being part of this important process. I want to thank all of the city staff for all the work they've done putting this budget together, making this process happen. And I want to do a special call out to Jessica Mummy, budget manager. Went through this process, which is a full-time job, and we did a parallel process, which was the fiscal stability task force. So this was a crazy year, and Jessica did a heavy lift on this budget. I could not have done it without her. I couldn't think of a better person to be in the trenches with working. So thank you, Jessica.
Can I just add one really quick thing? I want to also thank the volunteers on this board. It's how I started in politics back in 2008, was being on a budget committee. And it was the budget committee members back in 2017 who got together and said, we need to do something about the fact that we don't have enough money to fix the streets. And it was because of that and that getting together that we were able to get that $10 million bond that now became a $20 million bond, that we've been able to get stuff done that we really needed to have happen. So your work here is absolutely vital for what we do. So thank you.
If there is no other business, I adjourn the Springfield Budget Committee.